I ultimately destroyed 14 years of my ex-boyfriend's life, leaving him with nothing but a pile of digital bones and a username that branded him a cheater for the world to see. And it all started when I couldn't pay his rent. My now ex, let's call him Leo, and I met online over 6 years ago in a game called RuneScape. I was 17 and he was 14, but it felt like we'd known each other forever. We were both on the game constantly, and that shared passion led us into a long-distance relationship. Over the years, things got more serious. We were separated by 500 miles, but we saw each other every few months, and our main goal was to finally close that distance and move in together. We had even set a date for me to move in with him that December. Our relationship felt perfect. I was happy, he seemed happy, and we never had any major fights. But as I got older, my work as an industrial meteorologist started taking up more of my time, and I played RuneScape less and less. Leo, on the other hand, played more than ever. He struggled to hold down a job and had almost no income, but I supported him. After he moved out of his parents' house, I paid his rent from across the country. I didn't mind because he was a sweetheart, or so I thought. The problems began last November. Money was tight for me after covering my own bills and some unexpected car repairs, and I simply couldn't afford to pay his rent for the month. I called him to talk about it, and he just fell apart. He started crying, terrified at the thought of having to move back in with his parents. I tried to soothe him, suggesting I could help him find a temporary job, but he wouldn't hear it. He claimed his parents would abuse him if he went back, a claim I knew was false, as I'd stayed with him and his family multiple times and saw firsthand that they had given him everything. Concerned, I reached out to his father the next day to explain the situation. As it turned out, a friend of his dad's needed help managing a small warehouse and was willing to hire Leo for the season. It was simple work, lifting boxes, sweeping, taking inventory, and it paid $15 an hour. When I presented this perfect solution to Leo, he was disgusted. He didn't want to work in a shitty warehouse. He didn't want to work at all. His plan was to just play RuneScape all day, every day. Then, he had the gall to suggest that maybe I should work harder, maybe pick up a second job to support his lifestyle. Leo made a critical error at that moment, demanding more from the person who was already giving him everything. He was completely unaware that this single act of audacious entitlement would set in motion the very events that would lead to his own downfall. I kept my cool on the phone, but the second we hung up, I collapsed onto my bed and just cried for what felt like hours. I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. As a meteorologist, it felt worlds away from playing video games and using my Hulu account for a living. I almost ended it right then, but I decided to give him one more chance. A huge mistake. He eventually moved back in with his parents, and while he wasted his days gaming, I helped him find a job. I persuaded him to take a position at a small retail store, and he finally started earning some money. I was still spoiling him, sending him cash and buying him games, and our relationship started to feel normal again. A few months later, we pooled our money to fly him out to see me for 4 days. I was excited. We hadn't seen each other in person since the previous summer. The first few days were great. With his new income, he could actually take me out on dates for a change. Everything was perfect until the last night. While he was in the shower, his phone screen lit up. A Discord message popped up on the lock screen. It read, "When are you gonna leave here?" In that instant, I felt a rage so pure I could have snapped his neck. I had never felt so used, so disrespected, so completely hated in my entire life. This revealed Leo's greatest fatal flaw, a parasitic cowardice. He couldn't survive on his own, so he latched onto others, and when one host faltered, he simply found another, all while blaming the very people who kept him afloat. When he came out of the bathroom, I forced a smile, but deep down, a switch had flipped. I hated him. He could have dropped dead right there, and I would have spit on him. I spent the rest of the evening watching him play RuneScape on my computer, silent. He noticed my quietness and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine. Later, when we got into bed, he tried to initiate sex for our last night together. I rejected him as politely as I could manage without physically tearing him apart. He was disappointed, but fell asleep almost instantly. The moment he was out, I took his phone and started digging. I prayed I had misunderstood the message, but my gut was right. He had been cheating on me for nearly 6 months. The timeline made me sick. It meant he had started seeing this other girl right after I told him I couldn't pay his rent in November. I scrolled through what must have been 100,000 messages, each one a fresh wave of nausea. He had told her I was emotionally abusive, the same lie he told about his parents. He had talked shit about me, and worst of all, he had sent her my nudes so they could pick apart my body together. The next morning, I woke up late to find him sitting at my computer, playing his game and eating my food. It was like all our history had been erased. He was just an evil stranger in my house. I wanted to scream, to throw him out onto the street, but I didn't. Instead, I smothered him with as much love and affection as I could fake. I wanted him to think everything was completely normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport. He gave me a quick, somber goodbye, completely oblivious that this was the last time he would see me. He was heading home to his virtual kingdom, unaware that the queen he had betrayed was already marching on the castle, not with swords and soldiers, but with his own password and a plan for total annihilation. I drove home, held myself together just long enough to walk through the door, and then unleashed a wave of grief and fury so intense I kicked my bed frame hard enough to split the wood. I wanted to break his heart by the time his plane landed. I wanted it to really hurt. First, I logged into our joint RuneScape account, one we had raised together like a child. We'd always joked that if we split up, we'd split the account's bank value. So I took my half and transferred it to my personal account. Then I took his half and gave every last coin away to random players. I even used a special spell to convert untradeable items into cash, which I also gave away. The bank was now empty. Then I remembered, I had the login credentials for his main account written down in my desk, from all the times he'd asked me to train his skills for him. Without a moment's hesitation, I logged into his precious 14-year-old RuneScape account. His flight home was 4 hours long. I had plenty of time. I systematically sold every single item in his bank on the game's marketplace. When the purge was complete, I was looking at 4 stacks of coins totaling over 8.5 billion. Now, what to spend his life's work on? I wanted the most useless, idiotic thing imaginable. I messaged a friend who collected burnt food in the game. For those who don't know, burnt food in RuneScape is completely worthless. You can't eat it. You can't sell it on the market. You can't do anything with it. I asked my friend for the most obscure, unwanted burnt item he had. His answer, burnt spider. He had over 6,000 of an item called spider on shaft, burnt, and was willing to sell. Feeling generous with Leo's money, I gave my friend a full 147 billion coins for the entire stack. I logged back into Leo's account and deposited 6,083 burnt spiders into his now empty bank. I still had over 6 billion coins left. With that, I decided to treat myself. I bought 100 in-game bonds, which I redeemed on my own account for nearly 4 years of paid membership. I then spent a majority of the remaining billions on the best armor and weapons in the game for myself. The last billion went to buying supplies to level up one of my own expensive skills. I left him with a piddling 150,000 coins, which I gave to a random player cooking pizzas, and placed a single pile of bones I found on the ground into his bank. But the money was just the beginning. I wanted to inflict permanent damage, and here, I found the sweetest part of my revenge. Leo had what's known as a pure account. For years, he had painstakingly avoided training his defense skill, keeping it at level 1 to create a very specific type of player versus player character. The whole point of a pure is to keep your overall combat level as low as possible while having incredibly high offensive stats. This allows you to hit players far harder than they would expect from someone at your combat level, often one-shotting opponents who think you're an easy kill. It's a glass cannon build that, in the right hands, is nearly unbeatable by anyone except another pure. He could eventually earn the 8.5 billion coins back, but you can never, ever, unlevel a skill. With a few clicks, I trained his account to level 6 defense. It sounds like a small number, but it completely negated the entire point of the account. It shattered the delicate balance he had spent over a decade creating. To get that account build back, he would have to start over from scratch on a brand new account. It was the final nail in the coffin. For good measure, I located his in-game house, one of the nicest I had ever seen, which must have cost billions to build, and disassembled it, deleting every part into nothing. There's no insurance for that. Then, I went through his friends list, messaging everyone online as him, proudly admitting I'd cheated on my girlfriend. Any friends who didn't immediately delete him, I removed myself, and for the cherry on top, I changed his username to something that, within the 12-character limit, Let the whole game know he was a dirty cheater. He messaged me later that night with a stream of hateful, aggressive texts and pictures of himself crying. I replied with one final, sincere message officially ending our relationship. I also scared him off by threatening to take him to court for distributing my nudes without consent, adding that I'd file a cease and desist if he ever contacted me again. I have no plans to do any of that. I just want him gone from my life forever. Looking back, I realize I learned a valuable lesson. As one person later commented on my story, I should have had more self-respect from the start. For years, I financially supported a user, a waste of oxygen who latched onto me like a barnacle. Never again. In the end, Leo's thousands of hours poured into a game were wasted, just like the years of money and love I had spent on him. I destroyed his virtual life to teach him a real-world lesson about consequences. My revenge was calculated and total, but was it fair? What would you have done if you were in my shoes?